Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is Becky Heil with the Continuing Ed team for the State Library of Iowa, and I am going to turn things right over to Janae, our Youth Services Consultant, who will introduce our guest speaker today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Becky, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope it's a glorious Wednesday for you. My name is Janae Jackson-Doring. I'm the Youth Services Consultant for the State Library of Iowa, and welcome to Pop YS Live, Decoding Dyslexia. We have a very special guest with us today. Today we have Nina Lorimor-Easley. She's the Assistant Director for Education and Outreach at the Iowa Reading Research Center and the President of Decoding Dyslexia Iowa. She has a wonderful presentation lined up for us today, along with some resources, because this is a very, very popular topic that us youth librarians encounter on a daily basis. If you have questions, you're more than welcome to put them into the chat, and we will have Nina answer those questions for you. I am taking notes, so feel free to take notes. This presentation will be posted on Iowa Learns, so if there's something you miss or you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot, feel free to check your Iowa Learns account, and Sam will work on getting those things up shortly. And I am going to turn off my mic and camera, and I'm going to turn it over to our special guest, Nina.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to see if I can get my screen shared here. Are we good? I'll either Janae or Becky. You guys.
It looks great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your, I'm sure, extremely busy day to join us today. We're going to be talking about dyslexia. What is dyslexia? Some dyslexia resources, things like that. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself. My initial qualification for all of this was a mom, as is a common story. I have 3 kiddos. My 2 boys struggled terribly with dyslexia. And so I kind of ended up in this world of troubleshooting and problem solving and trying to help the boys. And it led down a whole new life and career path for me. So I went back to school, got a master's in educational psychology and a master's in curriculum development and graduate certification in dyslexia. I now, in the state of Iowa, I am the current president of Decoding Dyslexia. I was one of the founding members of Decoding Dyslexia, which is a grassroots group here in the state of Iowa. I was on the initial dyslexia task force for the state of Iowa, and I am currently the board chair on the state of Iowa Dyslexia Board. And then, as Janae said, I am also the assistant director for education and outreach at the Iowa Reading Research Center. There, one of my main roles started out as I developed the dyslexia specialist program that's taught through the University of Iowa. It's a master's level program that we teach here so that we can start getting educators into our school systems who really truly have a good understanding of dyslexia and structured literacy instruction. So that started out as my main role, and that has kind of expanded now. And I spend a lot of time consulting with school districts, helping them align instruction to really jump in and help our kiddos. So that's kind of who I am and why I'm here, the one talking to you today. So hopefully I'll give you some good information. Everybody kind of knows different things about dyslexia, so we'll talk about that just a little bit. I would welcome you at any point in time. If you have a question for me, go ahead and type it into the chat, and the girls will read your question. And if it's applicable to what we're talking about, we'll go ahead and address it. If it's something I'm going to address later in the presentation, I'll let you know, and we'll make sure that we get all of those answered before we wrap up today. So here we go. So what does dyslexia look like? This is one of the hardest things about dyslexia because it doesn't look like one specific thing. As a matter of fact, it often looks like something other than what it truly is. So dyslexia can be very hard to identify. It's kind of an anomaly, if you will, with kids' learning profiles and what we're seeing. So that's why it's important to know what dyslexia is. So that you have a broad range of things that you can be tuned into and can be looking for. So we have myths around dyslexia, and the first one is reversals. So just real quickly, if your knowledge about dyslexia is that it's reversing B's, D's, P's, Q's, just type a yes into the chat for me real quick. If your knowledge of dyslexia is that it is reversals of B's, D's, P's, and Q's, just type a yes real quickly. Just going to give everybody just a second. I am going to make you participate just a bit today by typing into the chat. So, okay, we're starting to get, yep, we're getting quite a few yeses. Okay, so for all of you typing yes, you are in the majority. Most people, that's what you know about dyslexia, is that it's B. You may hear people say, I see B's and D's backwards, or we just can't keep B's, D's, P's, Q's straight. So we're going to talk about that just a little bit. Reversals are indeed a characteristic of dyslexia. Now, everybody, if you're taking notes, brace yourself. Reversals should be cleaned up by the end of second grade. I'll say that again. By the end of second grade, a typical processor will not be reversing letters anymore. So if you have a third grader who cannot keep B and D straight, we have an issue and we should be looking at that very closely, okay? Those reversals should be cleaned up by the end of second grade. But let's talk about reversals. So there's no such thing really as a right-brained learner or a left-brained learner. We all actually use our entire brain to learn and read. However, oftentimes, people with a dyslexic profile or characteristics of dyslexia will be strong visual processors. So let's talk about that for a minute. I am going to put an image up here. This is an image of, I know you can't all, I can't hear you all, but hopefully you're saying it's a hat, it's a cap, something like that, right? So our visual processors have a good understanding of the world around them, and they know that this is a cap. And this is a cap. And this is still a cap. And this is a cap. They know that when you turn something in space, it doesn't become something else. It hasn't turned into an ink pen because the bill is facing up now. It didn't start out as a cap and turn into an ink pen when we turned it in space. Things stay the same. The interesting thing about that is that when we bring kids into the classroom, they have locked and loaded this concept. Something that is in space, doesn't matter which way it's facing or how it's turned, it stays what it is. Until we bring them to school and we show them a ball with a stick next to it. And we say, okay, this is a Q. And when it's with you, it says qua. Then we show them the same shape. And we say, when it's facing this way, now it is a B, it's a B. Now it's a D, and it says D. And now it's a P, it says P. So from the very get-go, when we bring kiddos into a classroom and show them a single shape that changes what it is based on what way it's facing, we have completely uprooted everything they've learned before they walked into a classroom. And so then we look at each other and we wonder why these little kindergartners and first graders get so irritated and upset about things. Well, if you walked into a room and somebody looked at you and said, yeah, everything you thought you knew is wrong, you also would get upset about it. It's just that our little ones can't verbalize how they're feeling. So reversals actually come from sort of a variety of different places, but the main thing to think about in reversals is oftentimes with dyslexia characteristics and that right-left brain thing going on, we will get many of our students who don't have a strong handedness, okay? That's actually a warning sign of dyslexia, a kiddo who is ambidextrous for a long time. For those who are neurotypical, B's, D's, P's, Q's, one of them, believe it or not, you've probably never thought about it this way, but one of them looks right. One of them looks wrong because you have a handedness that you orient to. If our students are having trouble developing that handedness, that preference, then it's random. It's a shape. It's facing one way or another. It's just like the hat turning. And so trying to grasp that concept that as it turns, it changes what it is in language is super tough for lots of our kiddos. So that's where reversals and the characteristic of reversals being so common with dyslexia come from. But it's actually a teeny tiny little piece of the puzzle. Okay. So the definition of dyslexia, and this is the definition that's currently in Iowa code. It's a specific learning disability that's neurological in origin. We're going to talk about that. It's characterized by difficulties with accurate or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. Okay, so when we start looking for dyslexia and we start talking about dyslexia, we're actually going to look all the way across a kiddo's language to see where we see evidence of dyslexic characteristics. The definition continued. The difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language, and we're going to talk about that as well. It's often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provisions of effective classroom instruction. Now, I want to talk about this just a little bit. Dyslexia, it would not be fair to diagnose dyslexia without an MRI in a student who has not at least been through kindergarten. Okay, we need a kiddo who, in order to find dyslexia, we need to know that a kiddo has at least had instruction in the alphabetic principle, in understanding the letters of the alphabet, and someone has started to instruct the fact that our language is made up of sounds and letters. Okay, now when we talk about effective classroom instruction, we don't ever want to blame dyslexia on, for example, if we say, well, their kindergarten teacher, it was their first year teaching. A first year teacher is not going to cause dyslexia, okay? Maybe there's other teachers who could have been more helpful for that student, but an inexperienced teacher is not going to cause dyslexia ever. So we don't want to play the blame game. We used to say oftentimes that dyslexia may not be your fault, but it may be your problem. Okay, and that's from the educator standpoint, from the parent standpoint, from the librarian standpoint. Everybody's trying to fix this problem. Then as we wrap up the definition, we talk about the secondary consequences. So secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension, reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. So this we typically see in kiddos around that 8th, 9th, 10th grade year that will have students who are good readers, but don't understand anything they've read. Okay, you've got a comprehension issue. So that is a kiddo who has learned to visually identify words, but hasn't mapped it with meaning and understanding. So oftentimes in unidentified dyslexia, we will have older kids who struggle to comprehend. Okay. All right, so this image right here, I want to talk to you about how big language is in our world. So when we talk about language, we're talking about all aspects of language, which is all of our receptive language, which is reading and listening. That's how we're receiving language, and our expressive language, which is speaking and writing. Now, I want you to think about this box. We call this the language box. Think about this. These 4 aspects of language, speaking, reading, writing, listening, these are inseparable. They're so complex and they occupy so much of the brain that you can't actually isolate any one of these skills. So if a parent comes into you and says, we struggle a lot, but it's just writing, okay? At that point in time, I want all the alarm bells to go off, and I want you to think of this box, and I want you to say, yeah, it's probably not just writing. The problem is writing is what we see. The kids write on a piece of paper for us, and it's evidence of what's going on with them, but hardly ever is it going to be just one of these issues. Typically, this whole language box is intertwined. So if we're looking, say, for example, you have a student who's writing and we see reversals of B's and D's, and we say, yeah, it's just B's and D's when they're writing. Immediately, I'm going to say, it's probably more than that. It's just that that's the piece that you can see, because we know that speaking, writing, listening, and reading are intertwined constructs. Okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some terminology we're going to go through here. So there's 3 very common elements that we talk about based on that language profile. You've heard of dyslexia, right? That's what we're talking about today, but I want you to know these other 2 terms as well: dysnomia and dysgraphia. And oftentimes, especially if a parent has started to kind of tune in that a student is struggling, typically you will have 2, if not all 3 of these things going on. So I want you to kind of be tuned into what these are. We're going to talk a lot about dyslexia. So we'll start with dysnomia. Dysnomia is a difficulty naming common objects and recalling words. Okay. The technical definition, which there won't be a test on, is anomic aphasia. Oftentimes these kids, if they struggle to come up with a word, they will create circumlocutions, and they'll talk around the word that they're trying to think of. So oftentimes these kiddos actually sound like they have a really high vocabulary, but you'll pick up on these patterns, and it's sort of odd language patterns. And I'm not talking about complex words that they can't recall. So for example, I'm not talking about a quiz where I say, "Who is this guy?" and you're trying to think of his name. Feel free to type his name into the chat box if you know his name, right? I'm not talking about those kinds of words or words that would be included on a test of some sort. I'm talking about asking a kiddo, "What is this?" and they struggle to answer you. So dysnomia is an inability to recall common everyday words. We have to be careful about dysnomia because not being able to come up with common everyday words can cause kids a lot of stress. And so this dysnomia actually can turn into nervous tics. It can turn into behavior type stuff. A lot of times with dysnomia, when we panic and pull the wrong word, for kids, that can be traumatizing. Like, for example, if a student is trying to say, "I just need a little bit of privacy," and they accidentally say, "I just need a little bit of pregnancy," well, put that into a 3rd grade classroom and imagine what happens, right? So you'll get kids who either can't find a word or they find the wrong word, and it's very embarrassing. And then we have social emotional issues that we end up dealing with when actually dysnomia was at the core of the problem. I don't know who got it right, but that's Steven Seagal, for anybody who was wondering about it. You're all like, "Oh yeah, that was him." Okay, so circumlocution actually looks like, if we're trying to think of the name of that device, we might call it an alternative scooping device instead of saying the word spoon. And so when you start to tune into these kiddos and they get these big complex descriptions of something, but they can't come up with the word spoon, you can start to identify that circumlocution is happening. These are actual circumlocutions that I have heard in my day-to-day life. Early morning sustenance, a kiddo who can't think of the word breakfast. The house layer below this one, a kiddo who can't think of the word basement. So sometimes with dyslexia, when a student will be trying to think of a word that they can't think of, it'll stop them with their expressive language, and it'll almost seem like a stutter. They get to a word that they can't think of, and okay, you'll see that kind of a thing. The difference between that and a stutter is that physical block. A true stutter, you'll see it block in their throat. Dysnomia is just not being able to think of the word, and then they might come up with a circumlocution for that. Okay, so that's dysnomia, and that actually, we see that very commonly with dyslexia. Okay. And then there's dysgraphia. So dysgraphia is the writing piece of things. Now, dysgraphia is about impaired letter writing, or a disabled handwriting, if you will. Now, there's still lots and lots of definitions being wrangled about what exactly is the definition of dysgraphia. But what we need to think about is dysgraphia is an inability to properly form letters in writing. This goes to a neurological mapping element that we'll look at here in just a little while. But these aren't kids who just write sloppy. This is a kiddo who, when they think of a letter, they haven't mapped it automatically. And so every time they get ready to write a letter, they are drawing a picture. Okay, so it's not automatic. And oftentimes when they're doing that, it will override all other language processing. So this is an example of a kiddo that we would suspect probably has some dysgraphia going on. We are looking for letters that orient to baseline. We're looking for making letters the same way every time we represent that letter. Even if it's sloppy, is it the same sloppy all the way through? We're looking for inconsistent pencil pressure. I smash the pencil in and then it gets really light. A lot of times these kids will like erase their paper so hard. These are the kids with holes erased in their papers. So those are some of the things that we're looking for with dysgraphia, which also goes along and will compound dyslexia. As opposed to this kiddo, which I'll give you just a second. This is a passage that has some issues, but this is not dysgraphia. We've got recognizable letters. There aren't any lines, but we got pretty straight lines. But we're seeing things in here like we don't have a real good grip on our spelling rules. We've got some confusion with sounds in here. So this is a kiddo that we would be looking at for dyslexia, but writing-wise, dysgraphia, we look pretty good. Okay, so we're going to talk about kind of these error patterns in sounds. So another myth of dyslexia is that it's curable. Okay, I've talked to lots of people who would say, well, I had dyslexia in first grade, but it was cured by the time I got to third grade. So dyslexia is not curable. Either you are or you are not a person with dyslexia. Okay, when you talk about it being curable, think about if someone was going to try to cure you of being left-handed, okay, or cure you of being right-handed. It's not about getting a cure. It's about figuring out how you process and getting the right tools in place to process that way as efficiently as you can. Think about someone who's left-handed, and probably some of you listening are left-handed. How much easier is life if you can actually get your hands on left-handed scissors versus right-handed scissors? Can a left-handed person cut with right-handed scissors? Yeah, it may be less efficient, maybe more frustrating. The outcome might not be as great as if they had a pair of left-handed scissors. Dyslexia falls into that same realm. If you are a processor who has dyslexia, then processing language in a typically taught manner is less effective, it's less efficient, and the outcome isn't going to be nearly as good as someone who is not a dyslexic processor. But we aren't trying to cure dyslexia, okay? Another myth that dyslexia is rare. So hold on to your hats here, okay? Dyslexia is not rare, okay? According to the International Dyslexia Association, 15 to 20% of the general population demonstrate some signs of dyslexia, okay? For reference, in Des Moines Public, that gives us about 4,950 students with dyslexia, okay? Now, one of the things to know is that many people who have dyslexia it'll never be identified in them, and they will be quite successful despite the fact that they have dyslexia, especially if they have mild dyslexia. Someone with dyslexia can indeed learn to read, and they can learn to read without specific intervention. Many of them can. The problem is many of them cannot learn to read without specific instruction or specific intervention. So those are the kiddos that we need to be really focused on. But dyslexia is not rare. It's actually the most studied learning disability there is. We know a ton about how a typical processor learns to read and how a person with dyslexia learns to read. This is not an unknown entity. The problem is we struggle to bridge the science of it to the instruction of it. And that's where we're focused, like the IRC is focusing and Decoding Dyslexia is focusing. How do we get this scientific information into the hands of teachers? All right, here's this myth I kind of addressed already. Those with dyslexia cannot read. Not true. we will run the gamut of people with dyslexia. You will get people with dyslexia who are great readers. That's that a lot of times 8th, 9th, 10th grade, and you listen to a kiddo read out loud and they sound pretty good. They're getting the words read, they're fairly accurate, and you ask them what they just read and they have no clue. So that doesn't have anything to do with reversing B's, D's, P's, and Q's. It's purely comprehension, but that can be caused by dyslexia at the root. So many people with dyslexia can read. We also have to look at our definition of reading, right? When we're reading a page of text, between 40 and 60% is what we typically refer to as sight words, words that can't be decoded, if you will. We also have plot and context. We have visual context, if there's any pictures whatsoever. And then our kids bring to reading a background and a frame of reference. So realistically, for a lot of students, about 40% of the text on a page will give them strong enough comprehension that they can answer questions about what they just read. Now, you have to be careful with the questions because oftentimes we ask questions that are true or false, or we ask a multiple choice question. If we take a kiddo who understands 40% of the words on the page and ask them a multiple choice question, they are most likely going to be able to respond to it. Whereas if we ask them a close procedure question, C-L-O-Z-E, close procedure, in other words, fill in the blank, that will give you a whole different outcome on how much they understood of what they read. So don't think to yourself that somebody with dyslexia can't read. If you hear someone read out loud, if you hear a kiddo read out loud, but mom is concerned that it might be dyslexia, the fact that they're reading out loud does not relieve the concern that it might be dyslexia. Okay? All right. An important thing to know about dyslexia is that it occurs on a continuum. You have dyslexia all the way from mild to severe. So someone with mild dyslexia may at some point in time, maybe mom or dad or somebody got us a magnetic alphabet set to stick to the fridge. And that was enough context to help them overcome the weaknesses that may have developed from mild dyslexia. Someone with mild dyslexia may be very, very, very successful, but just, I really don't like to read. That could be mild dyslexia. On the other end of the spectrum is you could have very severe dyslexia. And if you take severe dyslexia combined with severe dysnomia, and if there's any dysgraphia there at all, that combination could actually look like autism, because you will have someone who is excessively frustrated, prone to acting out, and isn't able to keep up academically in any way, shape, or form because of everything working against them. So that's one of the things that makes dyslexia really hard, is it can be very severe, it can be very mild. On top of that, dyslexia is not tied in any way to intellect. So if dyslexia is part of the problem or is the problem, you could have someone who's absolutely brilliant who cannot read or write. And that's a disconnect for us as the human race. That is a disconnect. When you have a strong conversation with someone, you automatically make assumptions about what they can do. You don't have a great conversation with someone and then walk away thinking, I wonder if he can read. Right? We don't do that. We have a great conversation with someone and we walk away going, man, he's so smart. He can read. Man, he's got it going on. Right? It's what we do. So this breaks with what we know typically of processing styles. What this causes is the blame game. So if we have a student who can have a conversation at an extremely high level, understands content like you wouldn't believe, but when it's time to do anything that has to do with reading or writing in regards to that content, and they either cannot do it or it doesn't take very long before they will not do it, Then we play the blame game. Then we say, oh, he's not motivated. Oh, they just don't care. Oh, he's just a rebel. He doesn't do any of the work. He's just a jerk. He won't do anything we ask him to do. Well, the fact of the matter is, if that student very young started out, they're very intelligent, they want to learn, they know the stuff they need to know, but they can't get it onto paper or out of a book, that is a student that at a very young age will start to become very frustrated, very embarrassed, and potentially very angry. So these students who have very high intellect and severe dyslexia, these are students that are at a really high level of risk because they're smart enough to sit in a classroom and understand everybody else can do this and I can't. So I must be stupid. And when that thought process starts in kindergarten, then the adults in that kiddo's world are going to have problems for quite a while. So think about this, and also especially in the role of librarian, where you've got just kind of the public coming and going, and you're dealing with whole family, you're seeing dynamics that are going on. Do you have kiddos who they come to the library because it's the only place for them to be at the end of the day because mom and dad are nowhere helpful? So dyslexia is 50% heritable if it's coming from one parent. We actually have beginning science that tells us it's 66% heritable if it's coming from one parent. If it's coming from both parents, then we're at 78% heritability. So if we have a parent who was not successful in school, who was angry in school, dropped out, was at risk in some form or format there, and there's a 66% chance that their kiddo is going to face the same issues, that parent does not have the tools they need to support or advocate for that kiddo. So this actually becomes a macroeconomic issue at some point when we start to look at the combination of reading failure and intellectual intent. This becomes very problematic. So think about that when you're looking at kiddos, and especially, I know I live in a small town, right? I see any of the kids running around on the street. I know who their parents are and how their parents are and what their parents did in school. That's small town dynamics for you. So if I see a kiddo who is running around, not getting much parenting, and I can think back and say, I remember his mom, his dad, whoever it was, struggled horribly and actually dropped out of school, I should be putting that 2 and 2 together. Okay. So big macroeconomic and socioeconomic status implications here from dyslexia. That's way bigger than BD, P, and Q. Okay. All right. So we're going to look at the science just a little bit. I'm not going to make you dig into this, not going to make you read any white papers, but we're going to just talk about it real quickly. So what is dyslexia? I'm going to show you. So when we're learning to read and we're learning the alphabetic principle, information will take the path of least resistance. So for a typical learner, I'm going to try, hopefully this works. Learning starts out here, and this would be, so this is a brain that's actually pointing down and kind of away from you. Sorry, when we're doing this on Zoom, it's a strange perspective. So this number 1 is frontal left hemisphere, right up here on the temple, okay? Broca's area. So this is where we're going to look at a new word that we've never encountered before. A typical processor is going to send that information back to the left rear hemisphere. This is where we are going to get word form and ortho, or what do the letters look like? Sorry, I'm trying to do this with my mouse, so you can hardly me. Sorry. But this is where the brain is going to automatically see that word, see the letter shapes, tie sounds to it, tie meaning to it. So this has to happen with a new word. This has to happen for a typical learner anywhere from maybe 3 to 5 times. Then when we start to come across that word, we're actually going to skip this part and go right straight back to here. So this white circle that you see here, that's because this is the area where we develop fluency. We don't have to stop and sound it out anymore. We don't have to think about it anymore. It just happens. If I was to pop the word house up on the screen right now, would you be able to look at that word and not read it? I'm going to guess the answer is probably no, unless you close your eyes and don't look at it. If you look at it, you're going to read it. That's because this area of the brain does things automatically. We don't have to think about it. It's where fluency happens. Okay. Let me get back to my pointer here if I can. Okay. So what happens with, now I'm not going to bother erasing all my stuff. What happens with the dyslexia, a processor who has dyslexia, here's what happens. We start in the same area. We start, sorry, I'm trying to get a different color here. Give me just 1 second. Okay, we start in the same area. We start in Broca's area right here. We look at the word, and instead of sending the information on the blue path, our brain sends the information over to the other side of frontal lobe. Now, here's what's interesting. Frontal lobe is amazing. The frontal lobe of our brain makes us who we are. It's the part of the brain that tells us how to react to the stimulus that we are encountering. If somebody says something funny, frontal lobe tells you to laugh. If somebody throws something at you, frontal lobe tells you to duck. So frontal lobe does a ton of stuff. It's really busy. It's an amazing part of the brain. So for a little while, frontal lobe can help out and figure out what these letters are telling us. But there comes a point in time early in life when frontal lobe has to pay attention to other things, like in preschool and kindergarten. Crisscross applesauce. When am I going to get my milk? Is it going to be white milk or chocolate milk? Where did my mom go? All those things. Frontal lobe has to keep track of all that. So the frontal lobe says, all right, we're going to send this back to the rear right hemisphere. This is where we do our visual processing. So what we might get is some words that we start to learn on a visual basis. It basically tells us that we are attacking language from a sight level instead of a sound level. So many people can learn to read this way, but again, it's not as fast as it could be. It's not efficient as it could be, and the outcome isn't as strong as it could be. Okay? So that is the neurological side of things. I'm going to see if I can, I've got myself all messed up now, I bet. Hold on. I'm going to have to figure out how to erase my lines. I apologize. I shouldn't have been writing on my screen and doing things that I don't know how to do. Okay, so this area of the brain that I have circled in blue, that's the white circle, that is called orthographic mapping, okay? Orthographic mapping is what allows us to get language automatic, okay? So when we've orthographically mapped a word, like I talked about the word house, when we've orthographically mapped a word, we will be able to automatically look at it, recognize it, understand it automatically. We don't have to stop and sound it out. We immediately know what it is and how it works. Okay, so now we're going to go to instruction meets the science. All right, so graphemes and phonemes. This is sort of the nuts and bolts behind dyslexia. We have to be able to understand that sounds meet letters, which makes words in our vocabularies, okay? So when we're talking about graphemes and phonemes, think about phonemes are the individual sounds in a word. A grapheme is a letter or a group of letters that represent a sound, okay? So every word will have the same number of graphemes as phonemes, all right? Get your typing fingers ready to go here in your chat. I'm going to put a word up here. Okay, the word is 8. 8. How many phonemes are in the word 8? And think about our definition of phonemes. So the definition of phonemes, there we go. All right, you guys are good. Yes, 2. There's 2 phonemes in 8. All right. So when we're talking about phonemes, we see these color blocks. Each color block stands for a sound. Let's do another one. How many phonemes in wait? There we go. Laura, you are quick on the draw there. All right, 3, very good. Okay. How about box? How many phonemes in box? B, A, S, box. Okay, 4 phonemes. Oh, there we go. Christy has given us graphemes. Yeah, exactly. Phonemes. Yep. So the X is the exception to graphemes and phonemes. Let's do one more. How about phlegm? Actually, I think I have 2 more. Phlegm. How many phonemes in phlegm? Yep, we've got 4. O, E, phlegm, 4. And apostle. To give you a second to count that one. Apostle. How many do we have? Oh, we have a variety of opinions. Okay. All right, we've got answers of 4, 5, 6, and 7. P, A, S, O. P, A, S, O. Okay, we've got 5 phonemes in there. Okay, so when we talk about the phonological component of language, remember back in our definition of dyslexia is a weakness in the phonological component of language. So this exercise that you saw, that you're doing right here, this is exactly what I would do with a kiddo. If somebody walked up and said, we've got 15 minutes, I need to know if I should suspect dyslexia or not. I'm going to set up an activity like this, and I'm going to see if that kiddo can hear the phonemes in language. Now, notice I'm using colored squares because I don't care about spellings. When I start to look for dyslexia, I'm not worried about spelling. I'm worried about phonemes. Remember, we have to attack language from the sound basis. Spelling comes later. The root of dyslexia is with the sounds. Okay? So as we work forward here, I'm trying to keep an eye on my time too. What might families be saying to you? Now, here's where, remember, my second slide was a chameleon. Okay? Families aren't going to come into you and say, I don't think my kiddo can hear the phonemes in language, right? That's not what they're going to say to you. They're going to be maybe in special education, but there's a high likelihood that they're not getting any sort of SPED services. It's a student who, if you ask mom and dad, how was it learning silent E? Because a lot of our kiddos see that silent E has been taught and they know it needs to be in there, but they have no idea when or how. So they decorate with silent E when they're writing. Okay. Sight words. You can ask mom and dad, how has it been learning sight words? I am not kidding you when I tell you I have had 4th graders brought to me who still can't spell the word was. And everybody is saying, oh, they'll get it. It'll come. If they don't have it by 4th grade, that's a problem, right? So sight words, how well have we learned sight words? A lot of times these kiddos can't copy from the board to save their little lives. The planner might be the piece of life that is about to bring a family completely and totally down, because that planner is never getting filled out. It's never right. It's never complete. It never gets signed. It may not even ever make it home. Okay. The planner, it can be an ugly thing. These kiddos, if they're doing time tests at school, they might be a complete and total hot mess and may have such social emotional fallout that just the thought of a time test brings on anxiety. Okay. You'll have kids who have behavior stuff going on, kids that are at risk of being thrown out of school. There are many, many kids who would risk getting in trouble more willingly than admit that they can't read or risk getting in trouble more willingly than risk being embarrassed in front of their classmates. My son, first week, first grade, he figured out that if he punched people, he was going to get thrown out of the classroom. So every time they were going to read out loud as a class, someone was going down. That's all there was to it, because he would rather be in the principal's office in trouble than have that round robin reading come around to him. And then low fluency or comprehension. And these are low fluency is the school's going to pick up on that. So they may be identified by FAST or by FastBridge. A parent may know that fluency is an at-risk factor. Social emotional. We're looking for kiddos with anxiety or depression. We're looking for finely honed avoidance skills. So every time we're going to read out loud, I suddenly have a headache and have to go to the nurse's office. Every time we're going to read out loud, I have to go to the bathroom. Bad, 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 bad. I'm going to do the dance so I can get out of here. You may have kids that even getting them out of the house in the morning is a struggle because they don't want to go to school. They may be nervous. You may see kids starting to sort of implode because they don't want to risk embarrassing themselves or doing something that would make them stand out. Oftentimes defiance, acting out, bullying is a safer place to be. If somebody's going to call me out for my inability to read or write, then I would rather just be a jerk to them and bully them to get them to divert them. In older kids, learned helplessness. You may have kiddos who have handed in no homework for the longest time because they've just figured out either that teachers will let them ride, or maybe they can get somebody else to do their homework for them, but they've learned how to not do the work and get by. They get so used to not succeeding that oftentimes they won't try anymore. And then in older kids too, we get this resistance to using helpful tools. I've already embarrassed myself. I know I'm going to fail. I am not interested in your help. I don't want your help. I want you to leave me alone. Okay. I don't want to do it because by the time they get old enough, it is far better that the speaker that I really, really appreciate once defined puberty as 14 years of doing everything in your power to not be embarrassed. So if every time I have to read or write, I'm going to be embarrassed, then it's much less of a risk for me to look at you and go, this is dumb. I don't want to do this, because it's much cooler to be in trouble than it is to think about it, a smart kiddo who's sitting in a classroom and knows that the kiddo sitting next to them is not nearly as smart as I am, but yet he can read and write just fine. I can't let anyone know that that kid reads and writes better than me. And so I will risk it. If it means I'm the class clown, if it means I'm the class bully, if it means I'm getting thrown out of here, it's cooler to be the class clown, a bully, or get thrown out of class than it is to let the world know that that kid over there reads and writes better than I do. Language, think about the language box, is 80% of our day. 80% of our day is spent processing language somehow. So if dyslexia is fully in play and all 4 aspects are impacted, then 80% of their day, these kids feel subpar. So we see it bubble up in emotions. Okay. All right. I want to make sure I leave time for questions. So I'm real quickly going to tap down. I want you to grab the screen grab. So there's many, many authors out there, and I'm going to give you resources too, where you can find lots of different resources, but grab this screen grab. Anything that's been written by any of these authors is great stuff. And this group is writing at all different levels. Sally Shaywitz is at the Yale Center for Dyslexia, and she's writing really high level stuff. Ben Foss cannot read or write to save his life, and he's written 12 books, and he writes for the kids. He writes about empowering kids with dyslexia. So there's a good variety of authors here. So any books that you have by any of these authors is great stuff. There's lots more out there, but these are kind of some of the main ones. And also, if you find any white papers by any of these people, you can always look at the references too and get information that way. Okay, so hopefully everybody's got a screen grab. And then I'm going to end with this slide. You can screen grab this as well. These are phenomenal websites that you can give to parents. The understood.org website that's on here, this is a massive nonprofit. This website, I don't know, last I heard, it was like 3,200 pages. There is so much information on understood.org. It's for parents, it's for teachers. You actually can go in and tell them who you are, and they'll match you with like audiences. So if I'm a parent of a fourth grader who struggles to read, they're going to put me in with a group of fourth graders who struggle to read. Okay. The readingleague.org has great information. Readingleague.org has a really complete list of decodable readers that it would be great if libraries had available for kids with dyslexia. There's lots of really, really great information on all of these websites. Okay, that was a lot and I had to go a little bit fast, but I did want to leave time for questions if anybody has them, or Becky or Janae, if there's anything more or any questions you have. I'm happy to answer questions or give more information.
Sure. Yes, there were a couple questions. Becky is asking, Becky Ruberg, do you know books in dyslexia font? Does this help kids?
The dyslexia font. So when we talk about dyslexia font, the Hank series, I believe, is all done. If you're looking for just readers for kids, the Hank series was written by Henry Winkler, who is horribly dyslexic. The Fonz, if that's more familiar. I think I date myself now when I talk about the Fonz. But he has written a whole series called the Hank series that's in dyslexia font. Now, what dyslexia font is it's a font that has weighted the letters differently so that B, D, P, and Q are not identical. It has a couple other features to it too. The bottoms of the letters are weighted a little more heavily as well. Now, will dyslexia font help kids? It depends on the kiddo. I want you to think of yourself, and you have seen fonts that are more friendly to your eye than others, right? Sometimes you get a wedding invitation that has this big fluffy scripty font, and you're like, what? Oh, that took me a minute. For some kids, the dyslexia font will make a huge difference. For others, it really won't make much of a difference. I actually had a kiddo refer to the dyslexia font one time as the font that's all underlined. So when he looked at it, he saw that weighted bottom line, and it looked to him like everything was underlined. So the bottom line is, if it makes it easier for the kids, then use it. There are plugins for websites and things that will turn all the text on your screen into dyslexia font. There's a lot you can do with it. For some kids, it'll help. For others, it won't. The important thing to know is it's not going to remediate dyslexia. So what we don't want to do is give a kiddo dyslexia font and think problem solved. Same thing with color overlays. Color overlays may help some kids. It just changes the reflection of the paper. It may make the letters easier to see, but we don't want to give a student a color overlay and think problem solved, because that's just kind of a helpful tool, but it's not solving the problem. It's a Band-Aid.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Laura had asked about dysnomia. Does that happen as we age?
So it's that's funny, because we talk about the difference between dysnomia and senior moments, right? So we do, as we age, it gets a little harder to come up with words. And so with dysnomia, we're really talking about before senior moments should be a thing. So you're talking about kiddos in up through college, mid-20s, even upper 20s, 30s. We should not be struggling to come up with things unless we are very, very stressed out. There's some sort of exception in life. This is just on an everyday processing. Now, as we age, we do start to kind of show some signs of dysnomia, but that's kind of a whole nother bailiwick. So we're looking for dysnomia in young kids who should not be struggling to come up with everyday words. Great question, though.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Sue Peterson, Sue asked, is stuttering part of dysnomia?
No, Nope. So a true stutter is not a part of dysnomia, and SLP should be able to tell you what you have going on. So when you have a kiddo with a true stutter, it'll have what we call a block. So you'll actually, we get that like stuck on it. Whereas typically with dysnomia, we'll see some other type of tick become the issue. For me, in my world, my son got to the point where he would get stuck on a word, which is what we called it, and he would hit himself in the head. So we'll see other nervous tics kind of develop, but a stutter is more muscular, whereas dysnomia is processing. A quick, and I know we don't have much time, but quickly, when you're thinking about dysnomia, think about a deck of cards. If I give someone without dysnomia a deck of cards and tell them to sort them, they're going to sort somehow. I don't know how, but they're going to sort in a way where they can find the card they need by color, by suit, by number, by whatever. My dysnomic processor, we hope, is going to keep all the cards on the table. Okay, so when I say I want you to find the 4 of spades, our typical processor is going to go, okay, black, spades, 4, got it. My dysnomic processor is going to go, 4 of spades, playing with the queen of hearts. No, 4, right? And they're going to dig. It's inefficient. They may or may not get to the right word. So it's a processing issue. We actually have neurobiological data that tells us dysnomic processors have longer neurons than other processors that actually protrude the surface of the brain under the gray matter. This doesn't happen in any other type of learner. Joseph Torgerson is the one doing a lot of that research right now, and he's got some interesting stuff about dysnomia and dysnomic processors.
Awesome. Carrie Becker, MRI for diagnosis, would that be a factor? Would that help or no?
So we actually can see, if you have the right person doing the diagnosis, you can see dyslexia in an MRI in newborns. We can see it. We can see the way language is processed. Think about it. We start learning language prenatally. When babies are born, they recognize the sounds of their parents. They recognize information and tone, things like that. We start to process very, very young. So yes, you can diagnose dyslexia with an MRI. Insurance will never in a million years cover it. So if you want to do that, you're going to pay out of pocket for an MRI, which I would not want to do. You also need to make sure that you're in a research hospital that has the knowledge and the know-how to look through that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the phonemes, how can we help develop more phonics for story times? I'm really curious about that. If you could share some insight.
Yeah. So anytime you have a book, any book that you have, if you pull out, what would be a list of vocabulary words, and instead of having the kids try to read those, just talk about the sounds. So one of our vocabulary words today is well. What sounds do you hear? W, eh, oh. How many sounds is that? It's 3 sounds. You're right. Well. So you're just really focusing on the sounds, not worried about spelling that word. Also, you can do some fun activity. There are books out there you can find word ladders where we're taking w, eh, oh. Now I want you to change eh to I. What do we have? W, I, oh, will. If a student can't do that by early first grade, we need to be focused on that kiddo, because that's all those skills that we need. It's phonemic, being able to discern and hold phonemes in memory. There's something called working memory that allows us to hold on to those phonemes long enough to do something with them. So oftentimes you'll get kids who read, and I read the word just fine here, but then I saw it over here on this page and couldn't do it. Yeah, flag that kiddo. Or they'll if they can't hold on to the words, if they have a picture, they'll use a picture. So say we're trying to do k, a, t, and there's a picture there, but they go kitty. Okay, that's not what we sounded out. If there's no picture, they may go k, a, t. bowling because there's no picture for context. So holding on to those phonemes is a great big piece of it too.
Awesome. Thank you. And we are at 2:00. Do you have your contact information that you can put in the chat? If anyone has any questions?
I sure do. I just have to, I think I have to stop share to do that. Okay. Yes.
And as she's doing that, I'll just jump in here. We will make the slides available, if that's all right with Nina. We'll go ahead and do a PDF. We'll put them in I Will Learn, so you'll have access to both her contact information. We'll make sure that gets in there. And we'll do some kind of a handout where we pull out some of the resources and those authors that she did, so you don't have to sit and watch through the whole thing again. Although I got to say, I was absolutely fascinated by all of this. I would love to sit and watch through it all again and pick up more the second time. Yeah, this was just incredible. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I will let everyone know Decoding Dyslexia does a conference in October that just for beginning level learning. It's a 2-day conference. It's what is dyslexia. There's lots of good information. So that might be a good resource too, that just for getting more information.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And everyone in the chat is saying thank you. They're saying great webinar, very informative.
Good.
We definitely learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate all of the work that all of you do and keeping those kiddos engaged in books and learning what a wonderful world books are is just such an important thing. So I appreciate all of you so much.